There is big news in the laptop space. Qualcomm, one of the largest manufacturers of processors for mobile phones, are launching their first chip designed specifically for laptops, the Snapdragon X Elite. This new processor is different to other processors currently available for Windows laptops. It's based on the ARM architecture. This makes it similar to processors found in mobile phones or Apple's M-series powered MacBooks. These chips are much more power efficient than traditional laptop processors from Intel or even AMD. And in a laptop, power efficiency is king. If the processor requires too much power to perform a task, you get short battery life, fan noise, and an annoyingly warm-feeling laptop. Dumping Intel processors for their own chips was the key factor in Apple's current dominance in the laptop space. Their laptops do not get warm, they don't have annoying fan noise, and they have very long battery life. Unfortunately, Windows laptops haven't been able to compete, but that could be about to change. Qualcomm flew a bunch of influencers out to their head office to give us an early stage look at laptops running their new processor. Normally, I don't attend these kind of events as we're just not a tech news channel. There are plenty of those already out there that rush out content on every trending topic. We are a what laptop should you actually buy based on real world use channel. But since this is just such an important launch, I decided to go anyway. Plus, I needed to do something else rather than go on endless failed hinge dates. Anyway, once we got to Qualcomm, we were bombarded with propaganda about how amazing they are, which I obviously ignored. Finally, we were shown some laptops running these new Snapdragon processors. Now, there is only one model of this processor, but laptop manufacturers will be able to configure how much power they feed to it. This will determine what kind of performance you will get. On display, they had some very early stage test laptops running their processor at 23 watts. As a point of reference, this is the same amount of power that the MacBook Pro 14-inch draws with the M3 Pro 11 core, so around mid-range power draw for a laptop. They also showed us some benchmark results of a laptop running their processor at 80 watts. This is the kind of power you'd normally see in a larger laptop like the Alienware M16 that I recently reviewed. Let's start with Geekbench, which tests a variety of common performance tasks. The 23-watt Snapdragon performed very well, noticeably faster than Intel's latest Core Ultra 7 processor in the Spectre 14. It also significantly beat out the AMD Zen 4 processor in our framework laptop. Apple's MacBooks with the M3 chips are still the fastest in single core. In multi-core though, the Snapdragon beats the Air's M3 by a good margin, but it isn't as fast as an M3 Pro MacBook Pro 14. The 80-watt version of the Snapdragon is a bit of a disappointment. For more than a tripling in power draw, it doesn't perform that much better. There must be massive, diminishing marginal returns of feeding this processor that much power. That being said, in single core, it is a good amount faster than the Intel Core Ultra 9 processor in our Yoga Pro 9i, and a little faster than it in multi-core. Keep in mind though, the Yoga Pro 9i only feeds its processor 55 watts. This all being said, the Snapdragon is not capable of competing with Intel and Apple's fastest, the HX and M3 Max processors. Taking a look at Cinebench, which tests how the processor performs when maxed out, we once again see some great results from the Snapdragon X Elite. The 23-watt version destroys Intel's latest Core Ultra and handily beats AMD's Zen 4 in both single and multi-core performance. Just like in Geekbench, we see slower single-core performance than Apple's latest M3 chips. This time though, it does slightly edge out the M3 Pro 11 core in multi-core performance. The 80-watt Snapdragon appears to do very well in this test, handily beating Intel's Core Ultra 9 processor, but as I said, that draws a lot less power. Once again, the Snapdragon just can't touch Intel and Apple's highest performing processors. Let's now take a look at the all-important performance per watt of power drawn, i.e. its efficiency. The Snapdragon with 23 watts beats out every processor, other than the M3 and the MacBook Air. The reason the Air does so well is because most of these processors give their best power to performance ratio at lower power draws. The Air just doesn't draw that much power. At the other end of the spectrum, as I said, the Snapdragon, Intel and AMD processors all experience massive diminishing marginal returns. The only one to scale well with more power is Apple's M3 Max chip. This is a little disappointing from Qualcomm. I imagine that they need to produce a different processor to better handle higher power draws, similar to what Apple did with their M3 Max chips, which have more cores than their Pro counterparts. At the end of the day though, this is a very strong showing from Qualcomm. At 23 watts of power, the Snapdragon X Elite does appear to make Windows laptops perform more like Apple's MacBooks, much faster at lower power draws and substantially more efficient. If you are looking for a big high-performance laptop though, don't get one with one of these Qualcomm processors. All feeding them more power does is make them look better in benchmarks, which is probably why Qualcomm is doing it. But the CPU performance is only part of the picture. Let's talk about AI. AI workloads are becoming more common and useful, whether it's blurring your background on a Zoom call to hide your messy bedroom or deleting an X from a photo. Heck, Decorilla, the online interior design company that I co-founded, uses AI to generate beautiful photos to highlight trends in interior design. In the laptop space specifically, there are two main aims for AI. One, take AI workloads that are currently being done inefficiently by the CPU and GPU cores and have them run by the NPU. These neural processing units are optimized to do such tasks. This will result in longer battery life, less heat you feel, and less fan noise. And the second aim for AI on a laptop is to shift some AI tasks from running on remote servers to the laptop itself. This should improve response times. These new Snapdragon X Elite processors are a big step forward when it comes to achieving those goals. Their NPU specifically can perform at around 45 tera operations per second versus the 18 of Apple's and the 11 of Intel's. So a big leap forward. And Qualcomm was able to demonstrate this in action. In a version of DaVinci Resolve that ran natively on these processors, they were able to run a tracking effect using AI. It ran much faster on their Snapdragon versus Intel's Core Ultra. But before you get hyped and immediately stop buying laptops with Intel or AMD, let me just be Josh for a couple of minutes. This isn't Qualcomm and Microsoft's first crack at this. We've seen Surface devices running Windows on ARM before. They did not take off. One issue is that those processors weren't designed specifically for laptops. They were rebrands of an existing Qualcomm processor. This has been overcome here, but I believe the biggest hurdle is going to be the way the Windows ecosystem works and how different it is to Apple's. You see, Apple owns most of the value chain, the processor, the laptop, and the operating system. Apple was able to ensure that all parts that they produced worked well together when they launched their M-series chips. And for non-Apple applications, they delivered a very effective translation layer, Rosetta 2. We didn't see any demos of non-native applications running on a Windows emulator for ARM. Some of the performance gains that I just showed you may be lost due to emulation. Plus, given how many companies are required to make this launch successful, there is a high chance that something won't work as smoothly as it did for Apple. So, temper your expectations. Many of the demos that we witnessed were done in highly controlled environments with software that was optimized to work off their processors. We weren't given any free rein to install software and test the laptops ourselves. Results were also cherry-picked, and there were many times that Qualcomm promised significant performance gains. But when we looked at their results, they had left out many of their competitors' latest processors in their comparisons. In addition to this, they didn't show us any battery life results. And then there is gaming. Qualcomm demoed several games, including Baldur's Gate. On the surface, things looked impressive, but the moment I looked closely at it, it was not as it seemed. All the games demoed were at 1920 by 1200 resolution, with all quality settings at their lowest. Even then, the Snapdragon-powered laptops struggled to generate more than 40 frames per second. Plus, there was audible fan noise coming from the laptop, and the keyboard deck felt very warm. That being said, for an integrated GPU, this is an impressive result. It handily beats out Intel's new integrated Arc GPU in their Core Ultra processor, but it doesn't come close to the M3 Pro chip in the MacBook Pro 14, and nowhere near an entry-level dedicated GPU. Plus, Qualcomm informed us that the first batch of these laptops won't have dedicated GPUs at all. So I don't want folks to be misled about the gaming capabilities of these devices. Basic games only. Finally, let's talk a bit more about AI. Yes, the Snapdragon processors dominate here, but AI is still very nascent. Many people either won't use these tasks all that much, or these tasks themselves just don't work that well yet. For example, they demoed generating images of animals, and they highlighted how fast their processors were versus Intel. But when I looked closely at the images generated, they were all garbage. The AI dogs all had very lopsided eyes. So who cares if one of these processors is faster than the other if they are both generating garbage? Right now, I just wouldn't advise anyone buy a laptop based on its AI capabilities. At the end of the day though, I walked away feeling cautiously optimistic. The Snapdragon X Elite does perform very well, and it is very efficient, at least at 23 watts of power. And I think this will result in better laptops for many buyers. Plus, it will place significant pressure on Intel and AMD, and that is a great thing. So hats off to Qualcomm. But the big question is, should you immediately stop buying laptops with Intel and AMD and wait for one of these? If you're a gamer or plan to buy an Apple laptop, the answer is clearly no. For everyone else, I think there are just too many unknowns right now. We haven't tried any final production versions of these laptops. We don't know if software will have issues running on them, and we don't know pricing. You could wait for one of these new laptops only to find there are issues, and you have to wait longer. Given how many great laptops there are on the market right now and the crazy deals that we're seeing on some of last year's still excellent models, I just can't advise you wait. If you are in the market to buy a laptop, you should still move forward. And if you'd like to see what laptops we've tested and recommend for different types of users, just check out our website. That's where you'll find them and the best deals on them. Finally, given these laptops will launch in the second half of 2024, I'm interested to see if AMD Zen 5, which is also launching around the same time, will close some of the gaps. There has never been a more exciting time to be in the laptop space, and straight after we left Qualcomm, I sat down with a friend of mine to discuss what we saw. Much of it is repeated from what I just told you, but I thought it might be fun to just see us casually chatting about this new Snapdragon X Elite processor, so enjoy. All right, folks, so I'm here with Max from Max Tech, and him and I have just finished being at Qualcomm together, and we were just...
Cool experience.
I mean, what did you think?
I liked it. I liked that the engineers, the marketing people, they're all enthusiastic, and sometimes you could tell they're doing it because they have to, but the team here actually really cares, and they're really passionate about what they're doing and what they're trying to do, so that was cool.
Yeah, and I think just to build on that, I think it was very clear they're taking this product launch very, very seriously. This is a big, big, big thing for them, and they really have their heart set on disrupting the laptop ecosystem, you know, particularly. So, yeah,
I mean... time.
Yes. Yeah, it's funny, because when I look back on it, I've seen two pivotal disruptions in, I'd say, the last couple of years. One being obviously Apple's M series of processors, very disruptive in the laptop space in a positive way. I mean, up till then, all laptops had terrible battery life, a lot of fan noise, a lot of heat you feel. Obviously, that changed it for Apple laptops. And then the other one being, I'd say, Ryzen 4000 was probably the big one, where we just saw massive increases in multi-core performance, and it really heralded in, and Ryzen as a whole, heralded in these multi-core CPUs that we now have.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what did you think? They've shown us some actual numbers, and you and I were talking about it, right? It's a little bit hard to verify. I mean, what did you think about like how they showed us the numbers?
They did what they could do. I know it's always, you know, most benchmarks with launches, they're cherry picked. You know, they want to show off what it could do, and, you know, it's their business. They don't want to show off something where it might not be doing as well. We did run a couple other tests there with a little bit of permission. But as a whole, it is pretty impressive. We had some good questions that were asked too. I know I asked about, you know, is the Windows laptop in balanced mode or is it in performance mode? And there were good questions about, well, what wattage is this chip running at? Because it can go up to 80 watts, which I don't know if that'll ever make it into a laptop there. It's more of, you know, let's get some really high scores. But they also... I'm sure we're going to have some crazy ones that put in the 80 watts, but yes. I hope so. It'd be cool to see that. I remember one of the last Intel Macs would hit like 90 peak for a few seconds and then shoot down. But they also gave us scores for both. You know, they labeled it variant A, variant B, but we know that's 80 watts and then 23 watts. So I think at 23 watts, it's really impressive. So let's tell the folks about what we actually saw in terms of performance of the benchmarks that they know. Let's start with like the CPU benchmarks, right? When we talk about Geekbench and Cinebench. I mean, you were saying earlier, and I can see this too, we're looking at, compared to say Apple's M3s, what did you see? Yeah, it kind of trades blows in some areas. So for like Cinebench, this new X Elite chip is doing really well. It's beating out the M3, and even the binned M3 Pro, it's beating it out as well, which is crazy. It's a 4nm design. It's their first really powerful big push. So that was cool to see. Of course, depending on what you do, the results can kind of vary. But I was impressed with the numbers, and knowing when they told us that, yeah, that's 23 watts right there, the performance per watt is really good. That's right, that's right. And we can show some graphs on screen. It was, I would say it was a very nice increment from where Intel is in particular. And again, compared to the Mac, very competitive. So for those who are wondering, I would say, I mean, let me know what you think, but I would say around M3 Pro 11 core is what you're expecting in their 23 watt CPU. Is that what you kind of felt was about right? So we had 1220 at 80 watts, which there you can get better performance, I think, at such high wattages. So usually the more wattage you put, it's not a linear gain. You have really diminishing returns. That's right. But at 23 watts, getting 950, that's better than what Apple's getting with their 3nm chips. That's right, that's right. So if we double back and talk about the NPU, because a lot of the focus was actually on the NPU, which is what's used to accelerate AI. And when we say accelerate AI, what we're talking about right now is AI on the device, being run on the device. Because a lot of AI today, what happens is when you press a button, you run something, it has to send it off to a server, it runs the AI there for the more intensive tasks and then send it back, right? So the image generation that we see with OpenAI and things like that,
it's very little is being done on the laptop today, like the background blur, that kind of stuff is being done on the laptops, right? But the NPUs here is a big jump.
Oh yeah.
So huge, right?
I was very impressed.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to tell them the numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're looking at, for Intel with the Ultra 7 155H, they told us about 10 as far as tops, so trillions of operations per second. And the M3 chip gets 18, so that's almost double there, but the X Elite is 45, so more than double.
Way
as
more.
far as performance. So that was a huge focus for them designing this chip, and a big focus of this event. What they talked about was AI with the NPU, what it could do, and a lot of things are shifting that way. Even with video editing, DaVinci Resolve, they showed off some stuff where this was done on the GPU before. Now it's being recoded to be done on the NPU because it uses a lot less power and it's a lot faster if you have the NPU performance.
That's right. And I think that's really where the performance improvement is at. I mean, we're talking almost more than double the Mac, almost quadruple the Intel. It's very, very significant here on the NPU performance. So incremental on the CPU, but very significant on that NPU. And just as Max said, yes, you can take tasks away from the graphics to do by the NPU, but you can also take them away from the CPU to do by the NPU as well. So that's very good. Now, the part where I thought things weren't that great, and I'm just being flat out with everyone here, was really in the graphics standard rasterization for gaming. Things were not great there. They gave us a number of different gaming tests, showed us that it all works, like Baldur's Gate and games like that, and we were all very impressed. But then we took a look at the settings, and one game that they were demoing us was 1920 by 1200, all low resolution, 30 frames per second. Baldur's Gate, I caught it doing 1920 by 1200, again, full low resolutions, and I recorded around 40-ish frames per second. So the gaming performance is not what I would hope.
A couple scores they shared, and I added some of my own. So they shared GFX Bench Aztec Ruins, and the Ultra 7 had 153 FPS, the X Elite got 295, and of course there's multiple tiers. So this is the normal tier, which is a little bit easier, it's in their favor, and the M3 got 324. And then they also had 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme, not the unlimited mode. The Intel did 32.7 FPS, and the X Elite did 39.1. The M3 does 48, and I believe the M2 is right in there about 40. So we're looking at M2, slightly lower performance. I think in GFX Bench actually matched up identical to M2. Yeah, I think coming from the Mac side, I think it could be optimization. And somebody referenced they're trying to work on more optimizations, because with this whole transition, we saw the benchmark numbers that are optimized for metal, and then we saw the gaming performance, which was half that, basically. It was a lot worse. And then some games got rewritten, and we had the whole like Rosetta translation of the x86, and then if it's optimized for metal. So the games that are well optimized work really well on Mac. There's not very many of them. So I think it could be a portion of that, and I don't know how much effort that's going to be.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. I mean, look, even the numbers you've got there, when we look at 3D Mark Wildlife, you're seeing not a huge difference between Qualcomm pulling ahead of Intel. It's pretty close. So I would say, if anything, the weakness that we saw was probably on the standard graphics side, and I wouldn't call it a weakness, it just wasn't as leaps and bounds ahead, I would say, than some of what we saw from the NPU and a little bit on the CPU.
I don't know, give me your thoughts on it. The way I see it is they have a chip design, they have a certain budget, how many chips they can make, and so I think they're prioritizing the NPU, because in order to get that performance, it probably has to be a lot larger of a design and putting less priority on the graphics there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And some of a particular gaming YouTuber who, great guy, asked a lot of gaming questions in some of the talks, and it's very clear that they're not prioritizing gaming with this initial launch. I would classify it as, I mean, you just heard our numbers, right? Can do some very, very, very basic games, but it's clearly not a priority for them, right? They're really hitting more the standard consumers who are browsing the web. And on that note, the first thing that they really mentioned that they're going after here is long battery life, and they're trying to solve that, right? Let's just call a spade a spade. It's 2024, and the fact that most Intel laptops in real use, actually really using them day to day. I'm not doing high performance workload, just doing office work, browsing the web, watching some movies, listening to some music. You'd be lucky to get more than 6 hours battery, I would say. And I'm talking about Windows laptops.
Yeah, and that's about what we've seen too in our real world tests, where you have like the advertised test with low brightness, one video looping or something. And then the real world, right around there, 6, 7-ish hours.
Exactly. And that's disgraceful, right? So the fact they're really going after that is a good thing. And we haven't talked about battery life much on this particular, when Max and I are talking here, and that's because they didn't show us battery life.
That is true. That's a very good point.
So that was a big miss. And because realistically, it's not just about performance, and we're hoping this, the performance per watt that it has been improved should improve battery life. It should mean less fan noise. It should mean less heat you feel. And for the most part, that played out. I touched a lot of the laptops while they were doing different tasks. They were mildly warm, I would say. And these are the ones obviously with the Qualcomm chip, the Snapdragon. The gaming, though, that did get quite warm, and I actually recorded the fans were going quite a lot in it. So clearly there's some work there. But I want to just turn to a different topic, which is really the emulation, because
that's what I was going to say.
And you touched on this already, right? That what made the launch of the M series processor, I think, so successful was that Rosetta 2 was in a really good position. So that meant some apps were ready to go. They ran native on Apple's M series, but other applications they could run on Rosetta 2. And funnily enough, most of them performed better than they did on the Intel Max anyway. So I think that it's really going to be a lot about, I know Microsoft is doing a lot of work to get ready for this particular CPU. I mean, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it's really like a make or break situation. I mean, we've done multiple reviews and comparisons with previous Qualcomm SQ1, SQ2, and some of the benchmarks were great, but when it came down to actually doing stuff, you'd open an application, sometimes it'd say, sorry, you can't do this, you'd have to download a different version, and then the real world performance was unusable at times. It was bad. And then you look at the price differences, like, you'll have a little bit better battery life, but buy the Intel version. That's what everybody just said, just get the Intel version. So it seems like Microsoft's taking this a lot more seriously. They couldn't speak for Microsoft other than what they've said in the past. It seems like it's finally time that they're going to, make an effort. They need to make everything work well. Yeah. And I wrote a note on here too that basically they didn't confirm it, but they made it sound like, yes, they are going to have some kind of a emulation thing they're working on, or translation.
That's right.
To make it work.
That's right. Yeah, they did say they're going to have some kind of emulation layer, but I'm going to be a little bit more cautious than you on this one. I feel like this is definitely going to be, if anything, the part that could, use the term make or break, but I'm nervous about this one, I would say.
I would say that too, yeah.
But yeah, this is really, I think, going to be it. And then the other part, I told you I was going to throw something at you here. I think the other part that kind of gets me is this CPU, they are comparing it, at least in their benchmarks, to, I saw Intel 13th Gen, Core Ultra, M2. They didn't have much M3.
Yeah, all the M3s I added myself.
Yeah, exactly. They kind of left those out, right? Yeah. But I think what gets me is this is probably going to start rolling end of the year. I think we're looking at a big announcement around Computex time, which is mid-year. But I think getting laptops in the hands of consumers, my gut is it's probably going to be around Black Friday. That's my gut. I don't know what you feel about that.
Yeah, they kept saying, we heard June, and they're like, well, we said mid, and they were being very cautious, and the vibe I got is it's not going to be... Yeah. It's going to take longer.
And this is what I'm, we have to be a bit cautious here, because there's a chance that Apple could release M4 by then and close this gap. There is a chance that AMD could announce Zen 5 for laptops and close the gap. So I think I would end this that I'm cautiously optimistic, but, I would say I'm optimistic here. I think this is good. I think it is very good for the industry. I think it adds competition. It's going to push these out of the... And we saw this before, right? Intel was charging just terrible amounts for extra cores in their CPUs until AMD came along and pushed them to do that. So I think this is actually a very, very good thing. And just me being me, I'm cautiously optimistic. But at the same time, I think I urge viewers not to kind of ignore every laptop out there right now saying, hey, Qualcomm's coming, or we should call it Snapdragon Elite, because X Elite is what it's called, that it's coming, don't buy any other laptop, every other laptop is irrelevant. I caution viewers about this. We don't know pricing. There's a lot of things that we don't know. And let's let the process take place, see the real reviews when they come out, and then we can make our decisions. I mean, what do you think?
I think absolutely. Like for the DaVinci Resolve thing they showed, they had, one task that was swapped over and optimized, but what about everything else that you're doing? And that's where the real world comes in, where you can have some great benchmarks, great optimized stuff, but if the programs that you're using are not optimized for it, the experience could be vastly different. And then that's when you have to make a decision of kind of what to get. And there's a lot of great laptops out there, Windows, Mac laptops. So yeah, I think it's better to wait and see. But like we tell our viewers often, if you always wait, you're just going to wait, forever, because there's always something else around the corner. So if you need a machine, there's a lot of great machines that can get stuff done now.
And you've got to factor in pricing too, right? The machines that have been out there for a while right now, you're often seeing them with big discounts when these new machines come in. Who knows? I mean, generally, based on history, right, we haven't seen discounts on new machines. So, and they come in at high prices, and we're seeing mass inflation right now in the laptop space. We really are. So, moral of the story is, relax. Don't panic that every laptop is going to be completely irrelevant the moment these launch. But this is a very, very exciting launch. It's definitely something to follow. So, subscribe to Max's channel, Max Tech. Make sure you've got the notification bell on, and that's all we got for you.